on how well or how much even of the antibiotics you can handle, right? And maybe that's why you're herxing worse than someone else that you may know that has been on this, and why you're not progressing through this, and how we can support your body to not herx as much by determining what enzymes need support within the body. Does that kind of make sense, or is it? Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's the hormone one we'll talk about a little bit first. Okay. I guess I don't want to speak too much about it because it is pretty individual, but with estrogen in particular, so estrogen is a pro-inflammatory hormone. It's the only hormone in the body that is actually detoxified through the liver as though it is a poison. Okay? Testosterone, progesterone, all of these just kind of get converted or shifted or changed within the body and it finds a balance. But estrogen is the only one that actually has to be detoxified through the liver. Everything has to be. Pharmaceuticals, right? Say aflatoxins, when you eat your peanut butter every morning, there's toxins from the fungus that grow in the peanuts. Your liver has to deal with that. Caffeine, alcohol. There's lots of things that your liver has to deal with. So in a cycling female, if you come in with Lyme disease, that's something we have to look at, right? We have to look at not only how much estrogen you may have, but how you're metabolizing it, because there's different pathways that your body can also put that through. Now symptoms will typically point us in the direction as to whether or not that is a problem. So histories of constipation, irregular heavy periods, clotting, these type of things. These are all symptoms that we have to kind of figure out to see if this may be an issue for you. Because typically, if you do have, bloating, tenderness, bad PMS or mood changes, a history of constipation, and you have Lyme disease, we always tell you you have to deal with the hormones. You have to deal with the hormones because if you're having those symptoms, those are symptoms typically of imbalance. And if your body's inflamed, it doesn't work as well. Right? Inflammation is there to heal you short term. You sprain your ankle, the ankle swells, it brings blood to the area, and then it heals and the swelling goes away. But if your body's systemically inflamed, it won't respond to the drugs as well. It won't respond to the oxidative damage that's happening from the infection within your body as well. So this is my little blurb on estrogen, but it's something that's quite overlooked. Now, when you start to go through kind of perimenopause, estrogen levels peak, right? So they go up, go up, go up until finally they will shut down too. And there's a lot of women that are in that kind of age group, kind of the late 40s and early 50s, that are kind of going through this period of hot flashes as well. That also impacts how you respond to these medications. So it's something else to take into consideration. Okay, any questions about hormones, estrogen? Anything like that? No. I know it's kind of a big topic, right? In terms of how does it apply to me in particular, but yeah.
How much does it cost to have your estrogen level checked?
Yeah, usually what we do is we'll start off with through the medical doctor, right? So you can get estradiol, estrone, and estradiol. There's 3 different types of estrogens and 3 different pathways that you can go through. So that you can get the 3 types of estrogens tested through the regular medical system if you have a good MD. If not, it's about $20 at hormone. It's about $60 to get those done. And then the 3 pathways, it's called the 2, 4, and 16 pathway, the good, bad, and the ugly. Those are what you inherit from your parents. So that'll determine how you deal with your hormones or how you detoxify your estrogen. One of them is cancer causing, one of them is kind of in between, and one of them is actually pretty important. That's the 2, 4, and 16. That's the good, bad, and the ugly. And so that type of testing actually costs about $250 to test, see where you're at. Usually we don't go that far unless there's a lot of hormonal picture to the person, right? Maybe a history of breast cancer in the family, ovarian, uterine cancers. And those, when you start to see that family history with Lyme, then of course we would go down that pathway anyways, whether you had Lyme or not. Because that's part of making you healthier, is figuring out what you're doing with them and how do we influence it. So you can influence how your estrogens or which pathways they go down based on what you're eating. So cruciferous vegetables, right? Broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, these kind of things. They actually push it into the 2 pathway. So even though you've inherited a lot of, say, the bad pathway or the ugly pathway, your food can actually push it over through the 2 pathway. So dietarily, there's ways to kind of influence your genetics. So this is kind of, again, where the individualized medicine comes. So very rarely do we have to test those pathways, unless it's really bad. or if you have a history of kind of female hormone-based cancers. Any other questions about hormones? I started with that one because it's kind of the most hardest one to talk about. Yeah.
Have you ever seen anybody, or would you agree that it's possible, because this is my goal, to get off the thyroid meds?
Oh, for sure. For sure. We deal with that all the time. As long as you have a thyroid gland, right? Yeah. Because some people have them cut out and then they say, I want to get off the drug. But with a thyroid, as long as it's there and it's functioning, theoretically it has the ability to come back online, right? So it's just figuring out why it's offline in the first place. So it's a little off topic, but it does play into this, right? Because it is hormonal. So things like copper is really, really important for T4 to T3 conversion. So this is basically inactive to active hormone in the thyroid. But there are heavy metals that are in our environment that kind of displace copper, right? So cadmium, lead, mercury, those type of things will displace that. And so you may have a buildup of these metals within the body, and that is what's impeding your body's ability to actually make it. So when you get thyroid testing done, right, like you get thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH, T4, and T3. But once you're on hormone, they usually don't test the last two. And then there's reverse T3, which is one that is almost impossible to get here unless you have an endocrinologist. But you need all four of those to figure out what's going on, right? Is it an issue between the brain and the thyroid? Is it an issue within the thyroid, or is it an issue with the thyroid hormone and the tissue receiving it? So there's kind of three areas of where it could be dysfunctional. And so you need to see all four of those numbers. And that testing, like I said, you can get 3 of them done through the product. They're $19 a piece. If I send you for it, that's what the province charges the healthcare system. So it's $60 for the thyroid testing. But that's part of it too, right? And because that's the gas pedal on metabolism, that's the gas pedal on your immune system too. If the thyroid's in a good zone, your immune system's working better. If it's weak or hypo, it slows down. Right? That's the volume switch. Any other questions on hormones? Okay. I was just talking to Jan actually, because with these topics, you could almost talk for 2-3 hours and do a presentation on each one. Like normally, I do have PowerPoint presentations and things like this that we would talk about the hormone cascades and the effect of stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline on thyroid function and on immune system function too. Good. The story goes on and on and on. It's a much deeper subject than just estrogen. But estrogen's an easy one to kind of remember to take home today, is to say, okay, what is symptoms of estrogen excess, right? Everyone knows them, but we just say it's normal here in North America. But in Asia, PMS is a disease, right? It's actually a diagnosis that you get in your medical record. And here we joke about it on TV, oh, it's that time of the month, I'm moody. But that's actually fairly abnormal in most other areas of the world. It's only normal when we have a North American style lifestyle and diet. And that's because things like, ground flaxseed, for example. Ground flaxseed binds estrogens in the poo and gets it out of the body. But if you don't have a very high fiber diet, the estrogens stay in the body longer. Right? So, and then there's the birth control pills and all the other stuff that we will talk about that happens in North America. That's kind of leading to this. But yeah, so the hormone story is much, much bigger, right? And so that's why it's important not only to look at menstrual cycles, but to look at thyroid, to look at stress and cortisol, and that plays a role in appetite too. So even just by talking about eating habits and cravings, we can get an idea of how well your body is dealing with the stress hormone aspect of things. Okay? So next one, let's talk about food sensitivities then. So how many of you have had a food sensitivity background? Couple. Okay. So with food sensitivities, I'll give you the background behind them, okay? So there's 2 types of allergic reactions in the body, right? Manitoba Health will typically do an IgE it's called, which is a skin prick test on your arm. So they poke your arm, they put a little bit of mold or dust or banana in your arm and see if you get a red reaction. If you get a red reaction, that's considered an IgE and you're considered allergic. There's the other side of the immune system, the one that works with vaccines and long-term immunity. So this is when you get measles is in the news now, right? You get a measles shot, theoretically you're immune to measles for 5 years or 10 years. That side of the immune system is the other side. It's the slow, long, progressive, long memory, but it's not life-threatening. So that one, for some reason, is not tested for in our provincial health system in this province. And those reactions can take 48 to 72 hours to fully kind of erupt, and they can take up to 28 days to go away. So what it means is that, say for example, you were born in the 70s, and that's when the doctor said don't have formula, or in the 60s, or don't have breast milk and you're fed formula, and you've been getting dairy milk since day one, you may have had an inflammatory reaction to dairy products your entire life. Oh, you wouldn't have known it because you always know that this is just how I feel. I always feel a little bit tired. I always felt sluggish. Oh, I could never keep up with my buddies when we ran around the track in gym class. That's just me. But that may have been an example of why your body's just not working well or it's inflamed. So what we try to do is we try to determine, again, is there something in the diet? One, the diet is your ability to heal, right? It's your fuel, it's your antioxidants, it's what's giving you the ability to fight this off, but it can also impede your ability to heal too. And so often we can tell that by stool discussions, right? So we talk about, does it sink, does it swim, what color is it, what does it look like when it comes out? Do you get gas, do you get heartburn, do you get bloating? All of these things will tell us if you are having some issues with indigestion, or if you're having issues with something that's in your diet. Now, you can also test for these type of things just by looking at general inflammatory markers in your blood work with your doctor. So this is something also that you should be asking for when you go to see your doctor, is looking at inflammatory markers in the body, right? Because if you're on doxycycline and you've got Lyme, you've been on this long term, things like ESR, C-reactive protein, homocysteine, these are all indicators of how much fire there is in your body. And if theoretically you're eating a beautiful diet and you're exercising as much as you can, and you're eating right, and yet the inflammatory markers are high, you know that something's going on. Right? But often, like I say, we can figure that out just through symptoms. Not everyone has to have digestive concerns with food sensitivities either. Some people have eczema, psoriasis. Some people have asthma. Some people have unexplained infertility. It can present its way, its symptoms in multiple different ways. The most typical are skin, breathing, and headache type things, or fatigue type symptoms. So it's very similar to what a celiac profile would be, right? Where only 5% of celiacs are people who are genetically allergic to wheat. 5% of celiacs actually have blow of bowel symptoms. But everyone thinks that 100% of celiacs have blow of bowels, but they don't. It's only 5% statistically. The other 95% of celiacs have migraine headaches, bad periods, and all kinds of weird and unexplained symptoms like juvenile arthritis. Right? It's not rheumatoid, it's not psoriatic, we can't figure out what it is. You just have arthritis and you're 12 years old. Well, that's another sign of a food reaction or a food-based reaction within the body. How does that happen? So I'll back up a little bit. So how do food sensitivities develop? One is, your immune system doesn't fully mature until about the age of 1. 2 is kind of more where the science supports, but we say at least till the age of 1, and you should be breastfed, right? And food introduction should be basically foods that you could eat with no teeth, right? If you go back 2,000 or 4,000 years, could you have eaten a bowl of rice? If you didn't, we didn't invent agriculture, no. So why are we feeding kids a bowl of rice, right? But could they chew on a mushy peach or an avocado or something like that? Yes. So one of the things is too early a food introduction in society. So we're giving proteins that are foreign to these kids much earlier in life, and then it's setting up their immune systems to develop a reaction to them. Second of all, with food sensitivities is we no longer have a seasonal-based diet, right? We go to the grocery store and we buy tomatoes every week. We go to the grocery store, we buy cucumbers every week. We buy garlic, we buy bread. But in the past, there'd be 2 or 3 months out of the year where we wouldn't have something, right? We wouldn't have a certain vegetable or a certain fruit. Nowadays, we seem to have the similar food in our, well, think about it, you go to the grocery store, you pretty much buy the same thing every time. And so that, evolutionarily, if you were reacting to a food one, you would know because as soon as the tomatoes ran out, your skin cleared up, right? But second of all, if you suffered from fatigue or some other issues with that, then again, they would come back as soon as you introduce those foods back in. But if you take them continually, you don't know. Because one is, you just think this is you. You just think that this is how you feel all the time. You don't realize how good you can feel until you get rid of these things out of your diet. So it doesn't mean that all of you have it, by all means. That's probably not the case. But based on stool, bowel movements, and other symptoms, you might be able to determine if that's something that might be helpful for you to help get the most out of your Lyme treatment. Any questions with food sensitivities?
What was the other inflammatory marker that you mentioned? You said ESR, CRP, and what was the other one?
Homocysteine.
How do we spell that?
HOMO.
Yeah.
CYSTEINE.
EINE. Okay.
It's normally seen as a cardiac inflammatory marker.
Yeah.
But what it does is homocysteine is a marker for how well your body's methylating. So methylation is the way that your body repairs DNA damage. So anytime cells are damaged, they use as methylating factors to repair that DNA. And the body uses B6, B12, folic acid, magnesium, right? Mm-hmm. And so homocysteine is not only a marker for inflammation, but it's a marker for your status of those vitamins as well within the body. So it's a nice one. Doctors will often kind of question why you would do that because you don't have heart disease.
Right.
But it is a marker for methylation, not just heart disease. So it's a really nice one. Yeah.
I don't think my GP even knew what homocysteine was when I asked him to be tested.
That's the difference between naturopathic doctors and regular medical doctors. I mean, we were trained to look at X-rays and MRIs and CTs and to understand the drugs and prescribe them, but we look at the body as a whole, right? And we understand the function of that body and just say that, yeah, sure, that's a marker very specific to something, but it also tells you what else is going on with other organ systems at the same time. So it's really important. One is to get proper blood work across the board because then maybe you can see what it is, right? If you're seeing high amounts of inflammation and you've done, you have a beautiful diet, it's super clean, and you've done some elimination stuff to see how you feel on different types of foods, then maybe it's worth investigating, well, either the hormone aspect or maybe the heavy metal or environmental pollution too. Or, mold or air quality issues too, which is another potential hindrance to you getting better. Okay, so with food sensitivities, the link with it is that with antibody, does everyone know what an antibody and antigen is? So I'll back up. This is basic immunology. But basically, when you have exposed to a parasite, a virus, or say tree pollen that you're alluded to, that's considered an antigen. So this is a foreign particle that's in the body. Your body doesn't really like it. Our immune systems basically latch onto it, and then what they do is they create little flags from that basically are little pictures of that antigen. And then those white blood cells wander around the body for years and years and years, and anytime they see something that looks like that, they plant a little flag on it and say, kill it, right? So this just kind of marks it for death. So that's what an antibody is these little flags that says, okay, if you see something that looks like this, put a little mark on it, and the immune system will wipe it out. The special killer cells will come in and wipe it out. So with foods, what's interesting is with the IgG or IgA, which is food sensitivities as well, these antibodies, it takes a certain amount of resource to produce them, right? Your immune system has to produce them, but then once they're produced, it also has to filter them out. And what organ is responsible for that? The liver, right? So a lot of it comes back down to when identifying what pressure. So this is how it connects with hormones. So if someone comes in with bad PMS, migraines, they're getting bronchitis every single fall, and I say, okay, well, let's look at the foods first because that's something you're eating all the time. If all of a sudden you take the burden off the liver, it doesn't have to clear and deal with these antibodies and antigen complexes all the time. Well, now it can deal with the estrogens more effectively, right? And so it's a matter of kind of optimizing what resources you have within your body itself, making it work better. All right, any questions about that? The food allergy test, just to give you an example of what it would be, I think it's $305 right now. Normally it's covered under benefits if you have benefits for naturopathic. It's a finger prick test typically that we can do in office, or if you want to do a much more comprehensive one with all kinds of weird exotic fruits and things, if you have a very varied diet, then it's a blood draw that you have to do at the lab. But it's pretty comprehensive, at least for the most North American diets. I have a few East Indian people that I have to send to the lab for the fancy foods, but anyways. So that's kind of what it looks like for that. Any questions on food sensitivities? Yeah.
And is it quite likely that you develop, say after you have like Lyme co-infections or whatever, that you develop more food sensitivities as you go?
Yeah. So that's a great question. Please ask more, because I'm not going off the PowerPoint, so I'm going to lose direction a little bit tonight. I'm sorry. But when your immune system is turned on, it becomes not as specific anymore, right? So it's basically ramped up. Volume switch is turned up. The immune system's on hyper aware, and then what happens is it starts to make mistakes. So I always kind of equal it out or equate it to like the military, right? The difference between snipers and infantry. Snipers sit there and they wait. This is your antibody antigen, and wait till they see exactly their mark, and then they pop, right? But the infantry just go out and shoot anything that's moving.
So that would be your ANA.
Pardon me?
That would be an ANA, like an autoantibody almost turn into.
Well, that's exactly what happens. So while it's attacking the virus, what happens is, or for example, the Lyme, all of a sudden it attacks the cartilage in the joint, right? So all of a sudden you're starting to develop an autoimmune disease from this, or thyroid, or other tissue that it starts to attack. So it doesn't become as specific anymore, and when it's heightened chronically, it becomes messy. And when it becomes messy and non-specific, you can actually do self-damage or develop self or autoimmune disease through that process. So that's a really good question. Thank you. Yeah. So this is why we look at food first, right? Because this is what you're exposed to every day. And we know that if you eat, say for example, a bowl of Raisin Bran, so this is something a lot of people think are healthy, right? So Raisin Bran has a higher glycemic index than white sugar. So for a diabetic, you're better off eating a bowl of white sugar than a bowl of Raisin Bran, because the Raisin Bran will raise your blood sugar faster. Okay? That's kind of interesting. Now, white sugar, we know that within 4 or 5 hours of eating, a small amount, even 5-6 grams, your natural killer or your white cell count, their activity can drop by up to 70% within a few hours of eating sugar, like a high blood sugar spike. So even just the functional effect of what we call a high glycemic diet, lots of carbohydrates or refined carbohydrates, inhibits your white blood cell function within hours of that meal. So if you're always eating a couple slices of bread, or eating a bowl of cereal for breakfast and oatmeal, which is apparently healthy, but if you get that blood sugar spike, then you're constantly inhibiting your immune system from working as well as it can. So you want to eat things like lots of protein, lots of fat, lots of good slow release carbohydrates, things like beans and things like this. But you don't want to eat things that are going to cause a parasite to have an easy fuel source very quickly, right? Because sugar is the quickest way, or white bread is the quickest way to raise your blood sugars up, and then whatever has access to that can grow very quickly. So it subdues your white cell count and helps it grow. Right? So diet is fundamental to this, and food allergies is something that we would look at with a person. Now, if you didn't have the resources to pay for the test, or you just want to do it on your own, basically you can research what a hypoallergenic diet looks like. It's brown rice, chicken, some select fruits, and some select vegetables. That's all you eat for 28 days. And then at the end of 28 days, when the antibodies start to kind of wind down, then you introduce them one new food every 3 days. And that's how the old school doctors did it. They didn't do it with fancy lab tests. They just took the foods out of your diet for a while and then reintroduced them back in. And be amazed what you can find. I mean, my first experience with that, I come from a Ukrainian background, and I had my first vodka and Coke at the age of 5, and a Rolly cigarette under the table at Christmas. I remember this. I had all-you-can-eat records in Brandon, where I grew up, and quite a few restaurants. I used to be very unhealthy, but I never was bothered digestively by anything. And then what happened was, one time when I was on a plane, because I used to lecture quite a bit on naturopathic medicine in the United States, and I was doing a hypoallergenic diet for the first time on detox, basically to see. So I took myself all off all these foods, and I was in Chicago airport and couldn't find any food to eat, except for a Chinese food place. I found they had broccoli, and I was like, okay, I can have the broccoli. It was the only thing I could find at the airport. And I ate this broccoli, and literally within a couple hours, all of a sudden I started to get hives on my stomach when I was sitting on the plane. I was itchy, and I lifted up my shirt. First time in my life I had hives. Well, why would I have hives? I've had broccoli in the past, right? I've had soy sauce in the past. But what happens with your immune system is it's not stupid, right? And inherently the body doesn't want to spend energy if it doesn't have to. And so I always equate it to someone walking into a party or a loud room like this, right? You walk in, it's noisy as heck, and you just hear a lot of grrr, but within 20 minutes, half an hour, you're sitting across from someone and you can pick their voice out of the noise. Like your brain has an ability to take out all the noise and focus in on that one person you're listening to. Where your immune system is the same way. There's a lot of noise all the time. It doesn't react to it. It kind of subdues the reaction. So then when you finally do go off the foods and reintroduce them back in, it's like walking into a noisy room. All of a sudden you get the true response again from it. So does that make sense of how you can have kind of a food sensitivity but not really know it? It affects your energy, it affects symptoms within you, but they're just low grade and annoying, but you just think it's you until you take it out and reintroduce it and have a very strong reaction. And then you realize that actually that thing was actually bothering you in the first place. So that's kind of that food sensitivity connection, right? Anytime you're dealing with an immune system function, we always look at food, whether it's bronchitis or strep throat or Lyme disease. Food is literally medicine. So that's where we have to go first. Okay. Any questions? Did anyone have any kind of really interesting reactions on any food sensitivity testing?
Oh, no, they can't.
No?
But I'm overboard.
Oh, with gluten?
I can't inhale it. I can't go near a bakery, whether it's yeast or flour.
Was that since a child?
No.
Yeah.
No, just recently.
Yeah.
I actually had an off-the-charts reaction to rice,
Yeah.
which is odd.
Yeah, rice
It's
is
seemingly hypoallergenic, right? But I don't know.
Anytime a patient comes in with rice allergies like that, and they're rare, but they do happen, it's not to the rice, it's to the mold, right? Because rice grows in swamp.
Yeah.
And even when you buy the best rice protein powder that I can buy on the planet, the most expensive one, and the purest, still has mold in it. You just can't get around it. There's going to be fragments in the cell wall, and that's what you're reacting to when they do the antibody test against that. So whenever I see rice come up, we know that there's a mold or a yeast issue, some sort of cross-reaction happening. And that's the same with baker's yeast and brewer's yeast, because that's tested for two things that you find in wine and breads. Those are friendly fire, right? When you have yeast growing in your bowel, then you'll start to develop reactions to other yeasts that are in your diet as well, because they're so similar genetically.
Does it ever go away?
Well, food sensitivities or yeast
Yeah,
allergies?
if you get your gut bacteria.
Oh, totally. Yeah. No. So that's part of it. One is rebalancing the bacterial population. The other one is giving it that break, right? So for example, tetanus shot, 10 years you get a booster, 10 years you get a booster. So 10 years it takes for that immune system to kind of forget about tetanus, right? The average in the research is 28 days for those antibodies to kind of go down. The longest that they've kind of been found is around the 1 year mark. So that means basically no exposure for a year for severe cases, but most people it's within 3 to 4 months. The other part of that is the newest research on it now that, because everyone's like gluten-free, they're taking it too far. Everyone seems to have an issue with gluten now. But there's a lot of papers out now on the Roundup-based fertilizers that came out in the late 60s. And it seems that a lot of people are having issues with the residues on the grains from that, because what's interesting, even with my daughter, she has immune system issues. And so we keep her away from the gluten and dairy when she's here, and she does okay. She doesn't get really bad infections. But when we go down to Mexico, which we did in December, ice cream, bread, whatever she wants, no problem, right? Come back here within 2 days, puffy eyes, congested, phlegm, everything. We went to Cuba, just like about a week ago. She can eat whatever she wants there too. So there's got to be something more than just the wheat family or the dairy family. There seems to be a lot of kind of pesticide or herbicide residues that are potentially causing the reactions, not necessarily the food itself. I mean, there's going to be reactions to the food in a certain amount of the population, but I think this kind of widespread kind of sensitivity that's developing, I think the story is still to be told. I think it has more to do with chemicals that are being left on the food rather than the actual food itself. So there's a bigger story to come about that for sure.
So even when you buy organic, it doesn't say pesticide free. You're still not buying pure food.
Right. Yeah, because there's even natural pesticides.
And the wind can take it too.
Yeah.
I live in the country and I watched them spraying.
Oh yeah.
And it would spray all over the place and everybody was sneezing and sick.
My master's project was in water quality testing. So I went up to Running Mount National Park because that's where my family farm is. And I did water quality testing on some of the streams in Running Mountain. And I found, this was in '99 when I was doing the water quality samples. And I was finding high levels of DDT in the water there. So DDT is that chemical that was causing all the issues with the bald eagles and death of the animals and such. And it's been banned since the 70s in North America. But yet there's high amounts in pristine national park water. Well, where's it coming from? It's coming from Siberia, because it comes over the Arctic Circle. It's not banned in China and Russia. We're still using it. And where does our wind come from? The northwest, right? So we're sharing an environment with other countries, and so there's also those exposures too. I thought that was kind of interesting. Okay, so that's kind of the food sensitivity story. Any other questions about? Yeah.
You had said something about the diet, the food sensitivity diet.
Right.
And where we could get a copy of
Oh yeah. Like I mean, if you want, there's. I think our new website will be out in a week from now, and I'm going to have all the diets on there and the patient resource things.
So it's on here.
It will be. Yeah. I've just got a new website, but you can Google hypoallergenic diet, and it'll come up something very similar to that. So the old school way of doing it is just eat that type of diet. And to be honest with you, it's not an unhealthy diet. I mean, it's what most of the world lives on. Beans and rice and chicken and fish and very basic, nutritious food. So it's not like you're starving yourself or becoming unhealthy. It's just it's so far removed from craft dinner and potato chips in the evening time and red beef and potatoes and gravy and all those things that we've kind of developed as a North American society here. So it's hard to learn to eat that way. But it's actually a healthier way of eating ultimately. Yeah. And how you also can develop food sensitivities. Binge drinking is a big one. Anything that causes damage to the gut. Food poisonings, something where there might be microscopic bleeding in the gut. And then another one would be like long-term antibiotic use. So long-term antibiotic use causes gastric permeability, right? And when you have permeability within the gut, the blood can touch your food, which is not normal. Right? Normally it's filtered through the cell membrane of the gut itself. So when you're on antibiotics long-term, which are Lyme patients, you are very prone to developing food sensitivities because your gut is being destroyed or inflamed on a regular basis with long-term use. So that's another reason that we need to kind of look at the food side of things and talk about a rotation diet, right? Not always keeping the same foods in your diet all at the same time. So if you do, it's going to start to become a problem for you. Okay? Alcohol, that is a big one too.
It's the first part of I think that's what happens to most Lyme is they can't drink it. I was never a drinker, but I think once in a while I would sit down with friends and have 3 beer, and then all of a sudden I started breaking out and they called it shingles, they called it all kinds of different things, and just rashes all over my body.
And you really feel like crap.
Yeah. And I never got any more.
That doesn't happen to me.
I was sick after.
I was sick for the first while, right?
Yeah. The headache of having a drink.
Yeah.
But I didn't really introduce it.
Yeah.
And it's okay. It's working.
Yeah, no, that,
Although I had a thing.
I didn't more, the brain doesn't work.
Did you already talk about it?
No,
No,
we haven't.
Okay,
I'm
sorry.
looking forward to this part.
Oh, good.
The middle.
Yeah, I would have liked to have shown you a visual on this. There's a webinar that I've done on food sensitivity reactions. I'll just recap with that. Is if you go to rmalab.com, which is one of the labs we use for food sensitivity testing, there's 2 webinars on there that you can log on for free. And they're about an hour long each, which talks about the science behind it and how you get it and how you heal it. And so if you want to learn more about that, it's on there and it's free. So it's rmalab.com or rmalabs.com.
Oh.
So that's one of them. I also talk about heavy metals on one of those webinars as well, but I don't focus too much on that in that. Now, with heavy metals, so this is, I guess we'll transition into that. Heavy metals. So, has anyone been tested for them in this room? Yeah? And what
Besides you.
What's that?
your results? Family sharing.
No, yeah, it was, like they were high for, I guess, mercury and lead. There was one other one too. I can't
And
remember.
it was a
which.
urine test?
Yeah,
Okay. And it was a 6-hour collection or 8-hour collection?
yeah,
And you used DMSA?
yeah.
Yeah, very good. So,
I don't remember what the other one was.
so with heavy metals, so here's an example. So our body really doesn't like heavy metals, and there's a good reason for it, because it induces death very quickly. So when you have heavy metal exposure, for example, you got mercury fillings removed, just as an example. You got a massive dose of mercury released into the body in which you ingest. Your body will put that into the bloodstream, or it will be absorbed in the bloodstream. Typically within about 48 hours, most of it should be shunted out of the bloodstream. If that mercury stays in the blood for longer than 48 hours, you start to develop real issues, things like cancer, leukemia, lymphomas, things like this. So what does the body do with the mercury? Well, it has to do one of 2 things. One, it either has to get it out of your system through your pee or your poop, or it has to store it somewhere where it's not going to be really found by the body. So for mercury, for example, mercury is a fat-soluble metal. So your body will shunt it into fat tissue. So what's fat? Well, this is fat, but so is brain and spinal column and nerves, right? So if someone swallows a thermometer and goes to the hospital and gets tested right away, they have mercury poisoning. And what are they given? They're given EDTA or DMSA, which are pharmaceuticals compounded to get it out of the system. After the 48 hours, if you test the blood, it's fine. So you can't go to your medical doctor and get tested for heavy metals in Manitoba because they'll do a blood test. And the blood test is only accurate if you were exposed to it within the last 48 hours. Okay. Otherwise, we have to do a urine test. Now, the old school way of doing it was a hair test. The hair test is not as accurate anymore. It has a lot of false positives because of hair dyes and shampoos and other things like that. So we don't use the hair test anymore, but we sometimes use it in autistic kids or kids under the age of 2 that we can't get them to pee in a jug for 6 hours. It's a lot cheaper too. So sometimes we'll do it if money is a huge issue. The urine test is only about $100 plus about $20 for the DMSA. And what heavy metals does, okay, so mercury goes into neurological tissue, brain, spinal cord, and fat. Cadmium and lead, they go into bone. Okay, that's where your body stores it. Now, bone doesn't have a lot of blood in it, but what it does have is it has your bone marrow. And your bone marrow is where your red blood cells are made and where your white blood cells are made. And your white blood cells is your immune system, right? So this is why it's really important to, one, to figure out if you have an issue with a burden within your body, and then also figure out what it is and then how to get rid of it. Because like we said, cadmium can impair thyroid function, lead will primarily impair immune system function, okay? Mercury tends to be more neurological symptoms. So we'll have patients come in with, for example, maybe Janet comes in and is talking about having mental fogginess and having problems with memory, and yet CT and MRIs are all coming back clean. Well, there's 2 things we would usually test: man-made chemicals, heavy metals, or Lyme disease. Yeah.
Did you say cadmium?
Cadmium.
I actually think that was the other one.
Yeah. So cadmium is one that's found in like cigarette smoke at really high amounts. And
what about copper? I was tested high for copper.
yeah, so copper, so you did the urine test? Or is this a blood test?
Probably a blood test.
So, yeah, that's more unusual for copper to be high in the blood. So, I mean, you can have high copper from copper pipes. I mean, you just can. We have copper pipes in our homes, and it can elevate copper. And elevated copper also has other health implications too. It depends how high it is, so we'd have to look at that. But usually if copper's high, that means that something else is out of imbalance, right? So we have to look at kidney and liver at that point, because that's how your body will get rid of copper primarily, is either through the bile or into the urine itself. But I don't, if it was a urine test, that means something different than a blood test. So if you think it's blood, then it depends how much higher it was. Yeah. You know, that's why we have to look at it. And even within blood ranges, right? So the ranges, and this is a little background on traditional kind of healthcare, is for thyroid function. So the range is 0.5 to 4.5. Most healthy people are 1 to 1.5. Okay, so when we actually test healthy people, the number should be 1 to 1.5. But the range is 0.5 to 4.5. So we know that if you're a 4.2, you're hypothyroid. You have symptoms of hypothyroid, you have cold hands, cold feet, you have lethargy, you have a hard time losing weight, but you don't have thyroid disease yet. Because those ranges aren't meant to mean optimal health. What they're meant to do is just exclude 5% of the population. So it's a statistical game. They just test 100 people, and then 2.5% of the worst and 2.5% of the best, and then they create the range there. But we know that health doesn't mean that entire range. And so when you do come in to see an ND, we look at blood work, and we make sure we look at not only the blood work once, but multiple times, because you have to look for trends within the blood work too. Right? Size and shape of the red blood cells, your white blood cell counts. That'll even give us an idea of whether or not the Lyme disease is coming out and actually infecting, or whether or not it's going into that cyst-like stage within them. To keep track of all this, that's why it's really helpful to have a medical doctor on hand, because this lab testing does cost a lot of money on a regular basis. So often I don't get a lot of my patients to do that unless they have a doctor that's kind of watching them and keeping track of it. But nonetheless, anyways, back to the metals themselves. So you can see examples of metal issues within just basic blood work too, even looking at iron levels. So elevated iron levels within the liver too will also show a burden. If you Google high iron, it could mean 200 different things. And often it's not treated from a medical perspective. But from us, that's showing that your body is actually stressed out. It's harboring iron. It's holding on to iron because it's gearing up for a fight. When your body is gearing up for a fight, it figures it's going to bleed. And when it figures it's going to bleed, it says, I need the resources to build more blood. So if your body's been fighting something for a long period of time, it'll be starting to store iron. And when iron does, where it is stored is in the liver. And when it gets high in the liver can't work well as well. So sometimes even doing phlebotomies or blood draws in patients to get that iron out of them so that the liver can start functioning better is part of treatment too. So this is, see how it's becoming so complex?
Too much.
Yeah, so
what test would they perform for that? What
just
would that be?
ferritin and iron.
Oh, just those?
Yeah, and then on a CBC, you'd look at MCV, which is your mean corpuscular volume. So the volume of this red blood cell, when you have lead toxicity, you'll start to see speckling pattern on the red blood cell, and sometimes that'll show up, but they don't. I've had a lot of patients where it shows up, but the doctor didn't say anything about it because it's not really a well-known.
Now, could that be associated with the speckled pattern in an ANA for scleroderma?
So it's different.
It's different.
Yeah, it is different. Yeah. But nonetheless, I mean, when they do an ANA, it'll be like a 1.1 speckled or whatever they give that. I'm having a mental. I was on holidays for 2 weeks. I got a lot of wrong. I'm trying to think. It's the word that comes back from the lab. But it basically needs pitted. It has a pitted appearance. I can't remember what the name it is, but that's the lead, what you see in the red blood cells. It'll cause a change in that. Now, we're in iron levels, so if you look at iron levels, so the volume of the red blood cells should be around 90 to 91. Most healthy people are in that range. If it gets down to 82, that's kind of considered microcytic anemia or small cell, and it's usually associated with low iron. If the red blood cell is getting bigger, kind of 95, 96 in MCV, which is still within normal range, but symptomatic, then the red blood cell swells too much, and that's due to low B12 or folic acid. So that's your methylating. That's another example of how we can look to see how your body's repairing damage. Yeah.
I had one of those live blood analysis, just out of curiosity to look at my blood cells, and they were, like when you see pictures of them on the internet or whatever, they look kind of concave, but mine were fat.
Yeah.
They weren't jaggedy or anything like that, but they seemed pretty plump.
Right.
Does that mean anything?
Well, I don't do live blood cell analysis. I mean, there's some things you can see on live blood cell analysis, but not a lot. A lot of it is kind of good marketing for those people to sell products.
They couldn't sell, they said they couldn't find anything.
Well,
they asked me, what are you doing? You must be doing something right.
That's pretty unusual, because usually it's about $400 in a shopping bag of B vitamins. But,
No, I didn't buy
but
anything.
no, it's true though. Like when there's a lot of inflammation in the body, the red blood cells will stack. So there are some things that you can see, right? The blood cells become sticky because they're preparing to bleed. Or you can see this kind of speckled pattern on the red blood cells, because that's essentially what they're noticing with autoimmune disease. So they're
Inflammation causes a sticky blood then too.
That's right. Yeah.
But I heard you mention that some are small and some are big.
Right.
Something that you said about the big one, if they're too big, you're lacking B12, did you say?
B12 and folate. Yeah.
B12 and folate.
Yeah.
Oh.
So normal red blood cells should look like donuts. They should kind of look like a disc with a little indentation in the middle.
Mine look like jam busters.
Yeah, so that's not right. Because what happens is your red blood cell's purpose is to carry oxygen. And when you look at surface area to the internal surface, when they get too big, they don't transfer oxygen effectively. So you actually get fatigue symptoms that way too. As well, the bigger the red blood cells, they can't fit into smaller arterioles. And so you'll end up things like in your ear, you'll get more ear ringing, the ends of your fingers will get different sensations and things like that. The really small, the blood cells can't fit through them. So then the oxygen starts to starve. And it's more apparent in the ear because those are some of the smallest ones. And, typically have more kind of ear ringing symptoms or vertigo or things like this. So that's more typical of these kind of balloon cells. Now, if it gets above 98, then they call it pernicious anemia, and they'll actually do something about it. But that's, again, these are things that I try to teach my patients when we're looking at blood work to look at and say, so in the future you can kind of track yourself.
I heard it could mean a mycoplasma or whatever, mycoplasma infection.
Yeah, I mean, we're oversimplifying. It's the same thing with basophils and eosinophils and all the white blood cells. Some of them mean viral infections, some of them mean that, you can go on and on. So it's much more complex than just that. But the reason I was talking about the size and shape of the red blood cells was more to do with the iron. And so with iron, for example, if the red blood cells are the right size, and yet, actually, usually what we see is that we have very small red blood cells, microcytic, basically what we would consider anemia, but yet adequate, if not excess, iron in the body. So what we'll see is that the body has more than enough iron to build the red blood cells the right shape, but they're not able to. And why is that? One is the bone marrow is having an issue, right? The bone marrow is not being able to respond in the way that it should to build those cells. So something's getting in the way. So I always equate naturopathic medicine to being a 2-year-old or a 4-year-old. You always ask why, right? Why, until you get your answer. And so with that, we look, okay, well, what could be affecting the bone marrow? One is constant immune stimulation, so chronic infection for sure. Things like cadmium or lead toxicity can also affect that. There's also issues with kidney hormones too, which the kidney plays a role in terms of your erythropoietin and certain hormones, right? So there's a crosstalk between your detox organs and your bone marrow as well. So always digging a little bit deeper and deeper and deeper to figure out why it's not doing what it's doing. But anyways.
I have kind of an odd question.
Yeah.
Something I've wondered about, I don't know if anybody else has experienced it, but it has to do with your faucet.
Yeah.
In your sink, okay?
Yeah.
I've noticed for myself, sometimes you take a paper towel and you wipe it and you get black gunk.
Yeah.
I've noticed for myself, because normally it's me at the kitchen sink,
Yeah.
okay? So that gets gunky. The faucet in the bathroom, my sink, gets gunky. My husband's doesn't. Is it possible that there's some kind of toxic metal in my body that's almost acting like a magnet? Like, is that?
I don't know how that would be.
It just to me, it's just weird. Like, I'm just wondering if there's some kind of connection to the metals or.
Yeah, no, I on your faucet. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how that would be.
And it's been like in the last couple of houses.
Why don't you switch bathrooms? Like switch, so he uses your, you use his, see if the same thing happens, and if it does, I would be concerned.
It's you.
What's that?
His sink in the bathroom is a foot away from my sink, so I don't know. I just wonder if there's something to do with the Lyme that's.
Shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. I don't know how to explain that.
Yeah,
Try switching sinks and see.
Yeah, switch it up.
It's just weird.
Again, in my
Lyme is weird.
Yeah.
so that happens a lot, right? So transfer to spouses or to boyfriends or girlfriends. That's happening a lot more now in terms of just saliva and bodily fluids, the transfer. So that's something also to keep an eye on. Now with metals, say for example, like I live in the River Heights area, I have lead pipes in my home, right? And so I don't drink out of my faucet. With other individuals, I mean, that's something I would recommend is maybe actually getting their water tested. It's free from the city. Yeah.
But what about things like showering? Like, I mean, I live outside of the city too, and we did have our water tested, like, when we moved there, but I often wonder about that too, because obviously you're absorbing, the water somewhat, right?
Yeah, the hotter the shower, the more it goes in. Usually it's more the chemicals that are going in, like the chlorine and the fluoride that will go in through the skin, and that has health detriments.
Yeah.
But typically lead is too big of a molecule to get into. Aluminum can get in through the skin, but again, there's typically not a lot in our water here. And cadmium is a big molecule too, so it's pretty minimal chance that those two would transfer across.
Right.
What about manganese?
Yeah, some of those smaller molecules, and then, like I said, that may be where the copper is coming from. Like some of these smaller micro minerals, you can absorb them through your skin. So that's a possibility. What's interesting about manganese is they've done prison studies on that particular metal, and what they found is it's not causation, it's correlation, which means they're not saying that that's the reason, but they do find that inmates with violent tendencies tend to have excess manganese in their blood. So there is a brain effect of excess manganese in the system. If you did the heavy metal test, they also test for all of those minerals too, not just lead and mercury. They test for all the kind of normal metals too to see if they're in balance within the body too.
Isn't that a big concern here in the city of Winnipeg now with all the groundwater?
Yeah. And there's concern here too, because in southern Manitoba we also have one of the highest, if not the highest incidence of irritable bowel disease in the world. So there's some thought that there's a connection with the groundwater here, and what might be in the groundwater or what's in the soil, the clay soil itself. I don't know what it is. I mean, there's a lot of questions and no one's doing a lot of research on it right now, but we do seem to have this hot spot in the southwestern. So basically from Winnipeg down to Buffalo Points in southeastern Manitoba. Yeah, it's kind of
right, plasma, anything to do with that?
well, this is the thing, right? Like
My question for that
Yeah.
is they sprayed Winnipeg in 1953.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're aware of all of that.
No.
the US government came in and sprayed it 35 times.
Wow.
And then they asked for all the results from anybody even having a sniffle. It was just released in the late 90s that they did this, only to the city of Winnipeg and the surrounding area. Would that have, and it can be passed on from generation to generation?
Yeah, I mean, these are all possibilities, right? I mean, yeah, there's a lot of different variables that can play a role in this, especially with bowel disease. I mean, this is getting a little bit off of line, but the populations in our gut and what is impacting our system and those balances, that's a huge can of worms there too. We've got blastocystis in our water systems around here. There's a lot of, they don't even look for it in the parasite testing here. They just kind of assume that it's a non-parasite, but I know people that have severe disease from that bug itself. Statistically, 50% of people are carriers and 50% of people actually get disease from it. But, I mean, there's another one, right? So there's a lot of different things that can impact our guts and our immune system.
So when we're buying water then, if you're saying not to drink the water, what is a safe water? If we buy bottled water, where do we know it even comes from?
Well, this is one of the things a lot of patients ask about, right? Because we start getting into splitting hairs, right? Because when you live and you start to know all these things, you start to overanalyze everything, and then it just becomes stressful living life. And so, like in our clinic, we use Jackson Springs, which is a groundwater source. At home, I had a reverse osmosis system for a while until I realized how acidic it was. And if you drink really acidic water, then it leaches minerals out of it, healthy minerals like calcium out of your bones. So there's, what do? You pick the lesser of the two evils, right? And so I just go, okay, well, I'll pick a natural ground source water that's high in mineral content and just hope that I'm leading a good enough life in other ways that everything balances out in the end. But we use Jackson Springs.
Does it have fluoride in it?
No.
Where do you get that from?
They deliver.
They deliver right to your house.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know that, okay.
It's got a pH. Nice company too.
Is it good water or does it have a flaw to it? Is it good water, Jackson Springs?
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
That's what we get. I just wondered.
It's an alkaline pH, right? So it's above 7. I think it's around 7.5, 7.7. So it means it actually reduces inflammation in the body because it harvests the acid when the body has to balance that out. It's got high mineral content, which is always nice because that's one of the issues with our own water or reverse osmosis water is a lot of the minerals are leached out of it or taken out of it, so then the body has to supply those minerals. And so that's the one I choose to use in this area of the world where I'm living now.
What about distilled? What about distilled?
Distilled water is almost the same as RO. It's very acidic. I mean, it's super pure, but it is so acidic, right? So what do? You take a multi-mineral supplement and a buffering agent with it with every glass of water. Like it just becomes so stressful to live life. So I just order spring water and it's tested for mercury and all those heavy metals. It doesn't have that. I can't talk about whether or not it has birth control residue and all those other things that are in our lovely drinking water here because it's just too expensive to test for all those things. But I'm assuming because it's coming from an aquifer, it's probably old water. So chances are it doesn't have all the pharmaceutical residues that Toronto City water does.
Question. Can you explain how, if you have heavy metals, how it can stall your healing?
Yeah. So with heavy metals, so how it can impair your ability to heal. So we talked about how mercury can have an impact on thyroid function. Right? Thyroid function is kind of a volume switch on your metabolism, but also your immune system. Lead and cadmium, they get deposited in bone. And bone is when bone marrow is made, or your white blood cells in bone marrow and your red blood cells. So those metals in themselves impair the immune system's ability to make new cells and good functioning cells in itself. That's the simple way of looking at it. I mean, there's the biochemistry you can get into, but the simple way of looking at it is you're depositing something in an area of the body where it's producing a product. These metals essentially get in the way of the communication chain within the body and then they make dysfunctional cells. Or they don't make enough of those cells, which is more than often the case. So with metals, the only way to know is, I mean, if you have, a lot of people will test them for it, and for example, it'll be off the charts for lead, right? And they go, well, how the heck did I get that? I have no idea how I got it. I don't know either. So this is the thing that we look into. That's why we look at job history, right? Dentists are notorious, mechanics, or anyone that was around fumes from cars, welders, you know, the shop people. Of course, that's huge environmental risk. Working at a gas station for 5 years in the 70s, you know, could have done that enough. They did a study on lead in the area in Toronto when I was there. This was in the early 2000s. And what they found was that the dust on the side of the road contained just as much lead in it that it did in the 70s. And the reason being is that lead is just, it doesn't kind of leave the environment. It's a very pervasive metal. Not a lot of bacteria degrade it, so it just kind of sits there. And so the surface soil just kind of keeps getting mixed up and mixed up and mixed up with erosion and crops and all this stuff, right? Because we keep digging up the earth. So lead is in our environments. It's in, it was a year and a half ago, Burt's Beeswax had one of their lip balms pulled off the shelf because it had high lead. So this is a natural bee lip balm, and yet it had crazy amounts of lead in it. Products, this is one of the issues with non-food-based products is in Canada, it's too expensive to test everything. So what they only test if there's a complaint. That's kind of scary actually, isn't it? So a lot of people could get really, really sick for many, many years before anyone could actually figure out, if they do figure it out. So the best kind of way to kind of avoid that is obviously try to figure out non-processed things to put in your body or on your body. But going back to kind of where you got the heavy metals from, lead pipes in my house, lead paint in the 70s, leaded gas. There was McDonald's a couple years ago pulled, I don't know if you know the movie Shrek. Well, they had glasses for the kids that had the Shrek pictures on them. They got pulled because they had super high amounts of cadmium in them. So this was just a couple of years ago with all this awareness of heavy metals. So think about those plates that you ate or that coffee mug that you had with a funny little joke on it. It made in China, who knows, right? It could have come from anywhere. It doesn't matter. The point is that you look, okay, well, I've been taking doxycycline for 2 years. I'm okay, but I'm not really okay. Why am I not healing from this? Let's look into why you're not responding to the treatment as well as you should. This should persist with these kind of drugs for years and years and years. Some of the neurological damage, if it's progressed, is hard to reverse. But the symptoms of fatigue and the brain fog and the pain and the joint dysfunction, these type of things that kind of flare up every so often, those shouldn't be coming back 2 years later if it's being treated effectively. So there's still something getting in the way of your immune system fully doing this, right? So dig deeper and dig deeper and dig deeper. The man-made chemicals is a whole other ball of wax, right? So I'm talking about PCBs and bisphenol A's that are in plastics and all these other kind of chemicals that we are exposed to on a daily basis that we're not even aware of. I was joking with the guy at the bank the other day. He was giving me the tape to sign with the credit union, and I said, well, how do you feel about being exposed to estrogen all day long, right? Because it's in the receipt. All day long, those guys are giving receipts to people, and they're absorbing the estrogens, the xenoestrogens from the tick tape. What kind of health impact is that going to have on him for 10 years from now, right? Right, that's spooky. Think about, so he comes in.
Very sensitive.
He's yeah.
Why are there estrogens in the tape, in the receipt type tapes? They just put something else on the ink?
Why would they? It's cheap. Right? Until there's a reason to. Like, that's the business. Yeah. So it's one of those things. They were saying that there's a study that I put it on our Facebook page. So I put a lot of, I'm not a big Facebook person, but the Facebook page for the clinic, I put studies all the time on. I try to do at least one a day. But there was one about, that came out warning pregnant women not to touch receipts because of you think of ingesting estrogens and throwing the imbalance off during fetal development in the first 12 weeks of life, and what impact that. And they just kept painting over it, but it's still in the air. And so even just looking for something as minor as that, some black mold around the windows in your office where you're working, that could be enough to basically hamper your immune system from being able to fight as effectively in the long term. So, yeah, do we do a lot of air quality testing or recommend that a lot of times? Usually not. I mean, unless, like I said, there's some sort of a pattern, because it's something you're inhaling, something that you're breathing in. It's much easier to figure out than something that's living in you and hiding and ducking in and out. So the mold thing, it comes up, but it's not as common. It's more common in people that live in modern homes or homes that are built in the last couple of years. It's not if you see in like Bridgewater Forest and that, they got sheets of drywall and plywood just sitting out there in the rain, and then they slap it up and put the tie-back plastic over it, put the siding over it, and a year or two later, they got mold inside their house and it's airtight. Right? There's no air circulation. So the new homes are horrible for that.
Scare taxes there.
And they're off warranty after all year too, so it's better for the builders. Yeah.
So I have a few questions. A couple of weeks ago, I had really bad pain. Finally went to the hospital. They said it was the flu. I said it wasn't the flu. Turns out they did ultrasound on me, and I have gallstones. They want to remove my bladder in a couple of weeks. My gallbladder, sorry, not my bladder. What do you think?
So here, a lot of people have their gallbladders removed. When the gallbladder is recommended to come out at an early age, to us that signals that there's inflammation in the small intestine, right? Because your body doesn't produce stones for fun. It doesn't just go, well, let's just make some stones. How stones happen is when there's bile salts in the gallbladder, right? And what the bile salts do is they break down fat. And the fat is important because that's how you make all your cells in your body. But when you have inflammation in the small intestine, remember how I said how you sprain your ankle and it swells? Well, when you sprain your small intestine, or there's inflammation in the small intestine, it swells. And when it swells, you got these little bile ducts that drops in. Well, guess what? That opening starts to pinch off. So when it pinches off, then the bile can't get out as freely. And when the bile can't get out as freely, the bile cells stagnate. And when they stagnate, they start to crystallize and form stones. So from my perspective, that's a sign of digestive issues, right? Inflammation in the small bowel. So there's something going on, probably dietarily.
So would you recommend that she follow for like the 1 month or 3 months, if she got the dietary testing done, like she's allergic to dairy and gluten and different things, to see if those stones will go away? She's supposed to get it out in 3 weeks.
Yeah, so you got two sides of the story here. One is gallbladder surgery is amazingly routine now. They go in pop. So it's not life-threatening, you can live without it. You should take bile salts orally with big fatty meals for the rest of your life if you do lose your gallbladder, because it will affect your fat absorption and nutrient absorption. But on the other hand, it's always nice to preserve an organ, and it depends on the type of stone too. There's multiple different types, fatty stones, there's calcified stones. So if
how did you figure out what kind of stone it is?
It would depend on how it showed up. So if it showed up on an ultrasound, then it's probably a fat-based stone. If it showed up in an X-ray, then it would be a calcium-based stone. Calcium stones are hard to get rid of. They're bone, or they're basically a rock. So you can do protocols to try and induce your body to get it out, which can also induce an attack, right? Because it could plug a hole. So I'm not usually recommending. If it's a fat-based stone, here you can dissolve them. So there is some things. There's a South American herb that they use. It's called Asia, which literally means break stone. And so that's something we use. Peppermint oil has also been shown to break that down. There's Google lipids, niacinamide. There's a few things that have shown to make the bile more fluid.
Acidic things break them down? Because I read online like to drink lots of apple juice and grapefruits and extra virgin olive oil.
What they're trying to do is they're trying to induce your body to produce more bile salts and more bile fluid. Because, so you have to think, if you've got a stagnant pool of water there, if you can all of a sudden start flushing a lot of clean water through, it'll start washing the mud out of there. Right? So that's essentially what eating that protocol or that food's trying to do, is trying to stimulate contractions and the bile to shoot out of you with the hope that it'll clear, right? So is that a bad idea? No, that's not a bad idea. But I would look at why your body had the inflammation in the first place, right? I would always go back to diet or bacterial populations in the stool too.
What was the name of that one thing you mentioned to break down like stone?
Chianca.
How do you spell that?
CHINCAPIEDRA. Sorry.
I get it.
Yeah, that's a weird one.
CHI.
IANCA. And then PINDRA. So there are things that you can take that will essentially thin the bile so that the bile will pass more easily through your gallbladder, and then when it's thinner it has a better chance of dissolving the outside of those stones and eventually either clearing them or helping you pass one or multiple ones or whatever. I don't know how many you have. Every cadaver I ever worked on when we were in med school, we were kind of open bodies, every person had gallstones. I mean, it's quite normal as you age, everything slows down and becomes less functional. So it's pretty rare for someone not to have gallstones. So then the question is, well, do you need to cut it out then, right? Like if everyone dies with them pretty much, why should you cut it out now? To me, it's a symptom. I mean, the worst thing that'll happen is you'll have gallbladder attack, right? Which will be incredibly painful. You go in and then they'll cut it out in emergency surgery.
They gave me morphine to take if it happens.
Yeah. Which may or may not work.
No, it did. I had
It
one
did?
when I was in Jamaica. I started to have one, so I took one morphine and I felt really good. I wasn't drinking.
Yeah.
But I had that too before I found out I had Lyme, and I had pain almost every day. I couldn't go to the gym. It was like extreme pain. I mean, I don't think I've ever had a real. I maybe had one or two attacks, I would say.
Yeah.
But I was constantly in pain until I changed totally my eating.
Yeah.
And then I got it out because I didn't know I had Lyme. I just.
Yeah.
Have you changed your eating habits?
I did for a while. I did for a few months, and I didn't really notice a difference. So I've just gone back to eating how I normally do, which isn't a lot of fatty foods, but I mean,
It doesn't take much.
sure, I do have like pizza and stuff every once in a while,
And with that, so the other thing, when you want to give an organ a break, you replace what it's producing, right? So taking bile salts, so usually they have from ox, is the one that is closest to human. Ox bile, and digestive enzymes with your meals as well, because if you don't have to produce it, then the body
Take
doesn't
it
have
off
to
the fatty
work.
food.
That's right, yeah.
Is that something that we would do, like, I know with my husband, he had his gallbladder out years ago, and same with his mom and one of his sisters. And since that happened, they just became very explosive. And so they've been taking cholestyramine or cholestyramine or however you say it. And that sort of helps to impede the flow type of thing.
Yeah.
So would it make sense for him to maybe consider bile salts?
For sure, for sure. I mean, it's a non-harmful thing that they could try out, and it's pretty cheap.
Instead of going for, and that's like natural as opposed to prescription, or?
Exactly, yeah.
Well,
I actually find everything's working fine and
Yeah.
actually fit it.
Yeah. Well, and some people regulate, right? And
It was quite amazing. I started eating crap right away just to see.
Yeah, I mean, you'll still drip it out. Your bile will still drip out of the tube, as long as it doesn't get too much scar tissue.
But isn't it true that most people that have the gallbladder out end up gaining a lot of weight? And it seems like everything that they eat shows on their body. Because the majority of my friends that have had them out, they just ballooned out.
Well, if you're not absorbing your fat, then your blood sugar doesn't stay stable, and you're more prone towards creating simple sweets and carbs and breads, right? Because that's the whole point of fat, is to keep your blood sugar stable and to feel full, because that's what fat does. That's why we love things that have lots of fat in it. So if you're not absorbing your fats, one, you'll see it in their skin, you'll see it in other areas of their body too. They'll be more prone to sunburning and all kinds of things. but they will be prone to having a sweet tooth or a carb tooth because they're not keeping the blood sugar stable.
Interesting.
Bile is also
Sorry.
the other thing that your body gets rid of estrogens through your bile. Okay, so if you're not getting rid of your bile effectively, then you're going to have estrogen excess symptoms. So there's also a hormonal kind of impact of what we're talking about here with you as well. But like I said, that's where you have to sit down with you and talk for a while and figure out who you are as a person, figure out where's the best way to go. I wouldn't be able to say you get surgery or don't without more information, but I'm giving you some ideas to think about.
You could always postpone it.
Yeah, you said like give it an honest effort, diet and everything else, like you can have it later, but.
Well, that's why I said the worst case scenario, you can go in for emergency surgery. Right? And it's routine surgery because it happens all the time, every day. Right? People go in and get their gallbladders removed. So, I mean, I try not to remove organs unless it's necessary.
It's interesting because they talk about the pain there. Before I knew I had Lyme and before I was first diagnosed with an autoimmune, which is really just the Lyme, I kept getting severe inflammation here.
Yeah.
And I went from my family doctor to a GI and all the tests because I kept saying, I associated it with my gallbladder.
Yeah.
Because to me that sort of made sense where it was. And every test they did, gallbladder was fine. Every other test they did, it was fine. But bottom line, it was probably parasites in my small intestine.
Well, 65% of your immune system is in your gut. It's the majority of your immune system is in your gut. So it would make sense that you would have gut-based symptoms with Lyme, or any other.
If you have Bartonella and or mycoplasma, they love your liver. Like it's just full, and your spleen, and your bone marrow. So if your liver's not producing properly, your gallbladder's not going to be producing. Everything's
It's all connected.
Yeah, I wondered if that was what brought it on.
Well,
Because I had no problems until
Then you had gallbladder?
I did. I just before, I was hoping that once I got it removed, all my symptoms would go away because I thought that's why I was so tired and sick. But no, I got it out and then it's
It's a problem.
Oh.